I recently rewatched Wednesday, and it inspired me to try something new, sculpting a little version of Thing out of clay. Now, I've never worked with clay before, and I have zero sculpting experience, but I think for a first attempt, it turned out pretty decent. If you're into this type of content, make sure to hit that subscribe button and let's roll the intro. Here's a quick rundown of tools and materials I've used for this sculpt. Paper, tape, some pliers, small needle and a file, polymer clay, which is non-air dry plasticine, some metal wires, any type of foam, preferably XPS foam, and some sculpting tools, which aren't a must, but they're good to have. Nothing just too fancy, just the basics to get started. If you're thinking of trying something similar, most of this stuff is pretty easy to find. Also, if you're into airsoft content and guides, make sure to check out my main channel, Bad and Diorama. Now let's dive into the video. To kick things off, I start by sketching out a skeleton of Thing. Since he's a magical hand, I went with hand bones, from the wrist all the way to the metacarpals and fingers. Then I shaped the base using metal wires. I bent the wire in the middle to form each finger, twisting it to give the bones something to grip. Once I had 4 fingers, I twisted the ends together and added the thumb separately. To reinforce the wrist, I wrapped tape around it and added a layer of tin foil for extra support. This not only gave it structure, but also helped the clay stick better later on. The idea was to make a standalone hand that could eventually support its own weight. After that, I layered more foil and tape to bulk up the bone shapes. Then came the clay. Since this clay is non-air dry, I had time to play around with the shape over a few days. I started applying it to the fingers and smoothing it with a ball peen tool. Now, my temporary stand was just a pair of pliers, and it worked, until the hand got too heavy. I watched a ton of YouTube tutorials to prep for this, and then just dove straight in. I kept dipping my fingers in water to keep the clay soft and smooth. I used anatomical hand references and my own hand for accuracy. One thing I forgot, the veins, but I'll make sure to remember on the next project. To build out the hand's muscle and structure, I flattened little clay strips and wrapped them around the fingers to mimic flesh. I paid special attention to the palm and knuckles, which were tricky, which required lots of smoothing, lots of reworking. A few days in, I felt like I had a solid shape. It was still too far off, so I kept layering on more clay to close the gap. Small cracks had formed in the clay, so I added a touch of water to soften and reshape them. Then I moved on to the knuckles. For the wrist, I actually reused a cardboard tube from an empty paper towel roll to save clay, because that stuff is expensive. I trimmed it, taped it to the top, and blended it in with more clay. I even use a champagne bottle as a rolling pin to flatten the clay pieces. Layer by layer, I wrapped the clay around the hand, blending as I went. For details, I used a wooden sculpting tool to carve in fingernails. And a needle to draw in the lines and stitch marks, but you can also just use a knife. To make the stitches pop, I rolled out thin ropes of clay, cut them into bits, and added them over the lines. After letting it firm up for a couple of days, it was time to paint. I used acrylics, starting with barbarian flesh and adding blood effects with a mix of reds. Then I painted the stitches black, though I'll admit they came out way too chunky and way too thick. I also painted the nails to bring everything to life. With the hand done, I moved on to the base. To keep the cost down, I just used a piece of foam that came in a box with some motorcycle gear. I didn't know about XPS foam back then, so this worked fine. I carved and roughed it up with a knife, airbrushed it in brown and greens, and added a layer of Mod Podge glue. Then I sprinkled real dirt from the backyard and topped it off with some diorama grass. Then I placed Thing on the base. He's heavy enough to stand all on his own, and of course, I made him a little hat like in the series. And with that, we're done and can move over to the Glamour Shots. If you enjoyed this breakdown, don't forget to hit like and subscribe for more builds. As always, thanks for watching and see you in the next video.